Okay, Dick's gonna get us started. Alexa, stop. Alexa, stop. Sorry.
Nice music.
In the name of the Father, the Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord God, we thank you for the gift of this new day of life. We thank you for the gift of the opportunity to be able to come to the quiet, to slow down, even when it goes against everything in our human nature. We are always wanting to know how we can slow down, how we can come to that moment of silence where we can give more attention to you. And yet, when it is provided, we tend to fight against it. But it is the flaw in our human nature that what tends to be in our best interest, we struggle with, but we desire all of those things that really give us no value. This is what it is that you continue to call us to each and every day. That the only thing that is worth pursuing is your truth, is your gospel. So we pray that as we come before you this morning, that again we call upon the Holy Spirit to give us that wisdom, to give us that understanding, to give us the courage to follow the desires to be in a deeper relationship with you. We pray that your Holy Spirit will be with us to guide our conversation, to inform our thoughts, to encourage our words, and then to strengthen our desire to do your will. We pray all of this in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay. I don't know if this is, I got to make sure this is not Leroy.
Yeah. Very generous.
They're delicious.
Okay,
Remember that.
nothing.
Excuse me.
So last time we spent a great deal of time talking about immigration. And I mean, I think it was a good topic, but I would suggest that we have to be careful not to get too focused on that topic. It's what does the topic represent and mean on a larger scale in our lives. I mean, I was just thinking about this the other day, reading one of the 20 or 30 articles I still do. I haven't unsubscribed enough yet, I don't think. But looking back, and I think it's going to tie in a little bit to the email that Marianne sent out to, I don't know if you sent it to everybody or just me or whoever, but if you got Hallow and Father Mike Schmidt's 5-minute homily on in the topic being indifference, or at least that seemed to be the theme of it. When you look back, and I don't mean in your very early childhood, because at that point, if someone mentioned the word politics to you, you would have probably looked at them like, where did that word come from? I mean, who cared, right? But as you started entering into young adulthood, I guess for me and my age, because they lowered, if you remember, back in 1970s, they lowered the age for drinking to 18. Do you know what the argument for it was?
Because they build war.
If you could go to war and get killed, you should be able to be old enough to buy a drink. Now, where that logic came from or how you put those two things together, I mean, that in itself is a interesting commentary. Politics. But so thinking way back when you entered into that adulthood, how much do you think of what was happening in the world, including Vietnam and everything else? I mean, we have to remember that it was only like 5 years earlier, 6 years earlier, 7 years earlier that John Kennedy got shot. Bobby Kennedy got shot right after that. So, I mean, whatever we think is going on in our world today, it was going on even back. But did you feel that what was happening in the world and the world events had as much influence on your faith as what is happening in the world today and the influence that is having on your faith?
Yes, when I was in college, definitely.
You felt like that.
It was influencing it, yeah.
That was it.
First of all, I've been accepted into the Navy,
Mhm.
and we were not to protest, right? If we
Right,
were-
right, right.
So-
Mhm.
To
Protest.
protest, you could, so I could have risked my military scholarship if I had been
Mhm.
filmed or documented
Yeah.
as participating in a protest.
Mhm.
So that was kind of interesting. I'm at a Catholic university,
Mhm.
and yet it was a women's university. And we sat together when they were doing a lottery for their draft numbers,
Mhm.
and everybody was paying attention to when their
Mhm.
brothers and boyfriends,
Mhm.
everything, what were their lottery numbers and where were they? And then talking about the responsibility as a citizen to serve, but as a Christian, if you don't believe in the war, and that was a whole conversation.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I think I went home and I was at Sunday Mass with my family, and I'm looking around and thinking, are you people all asleep in here? Don't you know what's going on in the world?
Mhm.
They did, but I was in that college environment,
Yes.
and it was a Catholic college environment
That's the difference.
where it was a part of the conversation. There was a lot of dialogue going on. But when I went home and I looked at all the farmers around me, I thought, well, they're just gonna plow the field anyway. What do they care about what's going on in Vietnam? And if their sons are going, they care. But other than that, do they really care? I mean, I was pretty judgmental,
Mhm.
frankly, when I went home. Like, why aren't any of you worried about this? And why aren't there any protests right here? It was my Christianity. It was the world order. It was politics. Who should be in power?
Mhm.
And I remember going out with high school friends when Robert Kennedy came to town, and they were carrying signs and campaigning for him. And I was being taught by Senator McGovern's sister,
Mhm.
who was my mother's best friend.
Oh.
And so I knew kind of I think I was very involved with all that. Were they preaching about it at church? Absolutely not. Certainly not at my home parish.
Mhm.
But even in college, they weren't preaching about it, but the topic was coming up in classes, including philosophy and theology. Yeah. And maybe I was atypical, but
Mhm.
that was, I graduated from college in 72, so I was there from 68 to 72.
So I think probably, you see, I was just the opposite. I didn't, the Christianity part with those events, I didn't think of it that as I do now. But you were in a Catholic college and I wasn't, so that may have made a difference. I mean, I just didn't put the two things together, It didn't affect Christianity.
Well, I was in a Catholic college, and I don't ever remember any time, any moment that there was ever a direct conversation about the war of Vietnam. There was, I mean,
My college roommate's brother was killed on Good Friday. in Vietnam. I
Oh,
mean, that brought it home.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that would make a huge difference, because I was trying to think, yeah, I didn't get it in any of the classes. I was trying to think, like, in the dorms and with the other students, was that now, the only thing I do know is we're all wondering.
Yeah.
I didn't have to worry about it when my lottery number came up, but
I think some of that was because we're older than that. And so consequently,
you're
we
right.
graduated from college. I did in 68. So
Okay. You were finished as I started.
there wasn't any talk about it wasn't until we probably got into married life. At that point, that's when you were called into. So that's kind of after that, when you started seeing the riots and the people marching and all the young people were going to Canada.
protests.
And, protests, and a lot of that stuff didn't start till probably 69.
Yeah.
That's right.
Somewhere in that area that it became, because first of all, we have to remember, news didn't travel at the speed of light.
Right.
Like it does today. Today, something happens, 30 seconds ago, and it will be on my phone. On here. Then it might have been a couple days.
We didn't have TVs in the dorm, but we did have
No,
shared
we didn't have any
newspapers, and we
TVs.
would take turns reading the newspapers in the lounge area with what was going on. So you're right, the way things were communicated was
Did you
very
go
different.
to a Catholic university?
Yes, yeah,
Okay,
women's
I did
Catholic.
too, but we didn't get involved in that unless you went to government courses.
Oh,
And I had a couple of those, two or three of those. Of course, that's part of history too, but it was kind of. I
Can
don't
you
know.
send Leroy
They had a couple
Leroy
guys that
the link to
diehard Democrats. And anything they said, you have to filter. If you agree with that type of, that political party, that's wonderful. Now, there are people in there that didn't, and of course, there are people that were not Catholic that went to the St. Mary's University in San Antonio. So, they allowed, you could go there and so forth, but we didn't get involved in heavy protesting or anything like that.
well, I think that only, because I was in nursing school at the time, and they were desperate for nurses, so much so
That's how I got my
that
scholarship.
if you joined in school, they were paying you as a private first class, and then you went in, said, I'll give you 2 years. And then,
That's exactly what I did.
and then you went in as a commissioned officer. So, I'm just kind of like clueless, and the friends of mine said, oh, yeah, I'm going to join. It's a good idea. I think I'd like to do that. But my parents had a sign for me because I wasn't 21, and my mother was not for it, but I went anyway.
So I think, did you send it to him? I think that for us, that when we went through at school at that time, other than the Vietnam War, there were not a lot of international issues going on. Our primary issues were the Watts riots, was the civil rights movement. But in my mind, and again, I think it might be the state of where I was, even in terms of my faith life, because, that was probably way on, that wasn't on a back burner. That was probably sitting out in a extra barn somewhere. I don't know, but I mean, beyond the issues that were going on, it was never part of a conversation of the moral issue that I feel. And not only that, there wasn't this tension between parties per se. I don't remember the arguments between either, pardon?
unless you lived in Texas.
I think if you lived in the,
Right there.
but I think, but see, I lived in the north, so that's an interesting question because up north, that probably didn't make as much of a difference as it did if you were in states in the south where they were more directly affected
Yeah.
by the whole, but none of it really ever seemed to impact the moral issue because somehow I don't know that we were ever impacted by that, even by the church. But to Marge's point, maybe we were, but because of the limitations of communication back then, where I mean, you can pick this up and it's just in your face like right now.
Yeah.
On many levels. I mean, on many levels. I mean, if the Pope says something at 9 o'clock this morning, by 10 o'clock, you will have 13 different
Yeah.
and whatever. But I don't feel that it was tugging at my faith back then as it is now. I mean, beyond the issue, like we were talking, beyond the issue of what's going on in Washington, or in Minnesota, even Washington for that matter. Beyond that, it didn't pull at your faith strings as much because what's happening now isn't just about political issue or whatever. It boils right down to basic moral and ethical issues. It boils down to to your point, how am I as a Christian, as a Catholic, supposed to deal with or respond to what's going on?
I struggled with that.
Well, and then, I mean, to the point of with a previous president and whatever, being a Catholic wasn't necessarily the most
Important thing in his life.
favorable thing. So even that creates more of an issue than back in our day. I mean, that we were never dragged into that kind of a political arena.
Except when Kennedy
Was
was
running.
running for office.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
It was
true.
A really big
Yes.
deal. I was in college at
Yes.
that time.
Because a Catholic,
He was
Because
Catholic, and I was in
Yeah.
a Christian fraternity.
They got the Pope on the
And I had 25 fraternity brothers who could vote, and a house mother
Mhm.
who could vote for that election. Do you know how many of them voted for Kennedy? Me.
really.
Really? Wow.
Because I came from still
Wow.
and
Wow.
I liked it. I read his, I can't remember the name, what was that? But I read that, I
Profiles in Courage.
Huh?
Profiles in Courage. Is that what you
Yeah,
read?
that was it,
Yeah, I had read his book in college, I don't have to read it, okay. But I read it, I liked it, I liked him, okay. I like Bob Kennedy, and I swear I would have voted for Bob Kennedy
Mhm.
in '64 if he hadn't been assassinated. I liked him too. I didn't vote for him.
Especially when you found out that it was Bobby Kennedy who was running the country more than John Kennedy at the time John Kennedy was even president. So when it came to the Cuban Missile Crisis, Bobby was the one who,
I thought he was smart on his butt.
Yeah. I guess it's-
But if you go back a few years and think about in college, you've got all these young people there. And guess what? Boys and girls. And of course, we had our young Republicans and or the Democrats and Republicans, stuff like that. And that would be another course. But the other thing, of course, I went to an all boys school, college there in San Antonio. And man, it was more, well, we're going to play basketball or football or something like that. And we're going to date these girls. There's some funds over here at Our Lady of the Lake or Incarnate Word and so forth and so on. Well, that's it. Our mind was not thinking too much about things that are going on when you're 18 to 25 years old, you don't really care about that.
Right,
stuff.
right.
I mean, they say that's political.
Right.
Well, you know, that don't
Yeah.
pay attention. Those guys.
You were way too busy trying to figure out how to get a job.
Yeah, that's right.
Other than trying to worry about, and how to avoid going to Vietnam. That, I mean, I mean, it
To
was,
your point, I think that's exactly true, that the college people, I remember we went, my girlfriend and I, the summer after we graduated from high school, my sister and her husband and family were in Los Angeles. And we decided to take the bus from Iowa to there and visit them. So we took the bus, we went down and lots of things. And the one day we went to Disney World. And so my brother-in-law took us over and dropped us off. And he said, when you get ready to leave Disney World in Los Angeles there, he said, call me so that I can be at the bus station to meet you when you get there. And of course, he was concerned, you know, and Mary and I were like,
About your safety.
why can't we just call him from the bus
Yeah.
depot when we get there? Surely they have a phone, because I don't know what time or whatever. But anyway, we did as we were told. I said we were there and getting ready. And I said, well, we better call Fritz, my brother-in-law, tell him we're leaving. And he said, okay, I'm on my way to the station. And he said, and this is the other thing I want you to do. I do not want you to step foot off the bus until you see me. And we were like,
Wow.
wow, he's really being weird, isn't he? You know, I thought, what in the world is he thinking? You know, so we take the bus, we get off, we get into the bus station, we look out, and there isn't a white person to be seen. It is nothing but black individuals all over the place. The Watts riots took place a week later
Oh
after
my
we had
God.
left there. He knew in his level in college and teaching and going to school there at that age, but us as kids, as you said, we had no clue that was going on.
Yeah.
You know, we had no idea why he was so worked up over this.
If you had iPhones back then, you would have known.
yeah,
Oh,
right.
There's a point about communication.
Well, yeah,
We didn't have that kind of-
because you would have also seen the pictures.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it would have been, you
Yeah.
would have known that we probably would have never done that.
Yeah.
In there, right.
Well, and I think part of the problem today is why everybody gets so worked up and so, it's because we know too much.
We're
Yes.
bombarded.
We're
Yeah.
Information,
bombarded.
whether it's accurate
And
or
it's just
inaccurate.
comes, seems like comes from one side mostly, and, you know, you just,
But now, not to lose the original question,
Go back.
was, so now we're talking about this, but the question that I'm really interested in is the effect of all of these things back then on your faith versus the effect that what's happening in our world today is on our faith. I mean, again, with the previous administration, your faith was called into question. Well, how can you not accept this? How can you not accept women's rights? How can you not accept that some person claims they're no longer male or female, they're the opposite of whatever, or that transgenders now, males can enter into female world, and we weren't challenged with those things. And but our faith is called.
Abortion is the same issue.
Well, yes, but then here we're also getting all of the mixed messages from our shepherds, if you will. We were sitting here and, well, what did he mean by that? Or what did this bishop mean by that? Or what was the Pope thinking when he said that? Or whatever it happened to be. You know, should we be more open-minded? I mean, the whole immigration issue we talked about last week, your very question is what I'm trying to get at is, back in our day, we never asked that question. Even with the Watts riot, we never, with the whole civil rights movement, I don't think we ever got brought into that kind of a mindset of thinking.
Civil rights movement, we should have been more wise, and that's a faith issue too. I mean, but it's been with us in my life too. I mean, right, there's always been the blacks who seem to be second-rate citizens. You know, unfortunately, that's That's what they tended to be for a variety of different reasons. Not on a one-on-one basis, just like anybody else. But they didn't seem to have the same status in society as white people. Okay, and that's wrong. Okay, that's clearly wrong, and that should be against our faith too. But I don't think you ever talked about it that way. At least I didn't.
Yeah, and again, we could argue the morality of what we did or didn't believe in at the time, and that's another layer of the question. Beyond does it affect you or whatever? And as I was listening to you, I mean, where Marge and I lived in Dubuque, Iowa, not just Dubuque, Iowa, but the entire surrounding area. I mean, Bankston, Iowa, where I grew up, was a whole farm community. There was the church, my parents' house, and our first convenience store I don't know why our dad didn't turn that into a multi-billion-dollar corporation. He was probably one of the first convenience stores there ever was.
Were there any blacks or non-whites in the area?
That's just it.
We were 99.8% white and almost the same percentage of Catholic I mean, in Dubuque, Iowa, with at that time maybe 50,000 people, we had 14 churches in all of Austin. In Austin itself, I'm not talking about I'm talking Austin,
Or Austin.
downtown, the
Downtown.
city of Austin, which would be the equivalent of Dubuque, Iowa, right?
Oh,
Million people. How many churches? 5, 6 parishes? I mean, 50,000, 14 parishes, 1,000,000, 5 parishes. But being in the north, there was a whole, I mean, when we moved here, John Deere Dubuque Tractor Works that wanted government contracts had to go into Chicago to convince Black families to move to Dubuque, Iowa, so they could get a quota in order to get a government contract. I guess the point I'm trying to say is that where you lived maybe might have had as much of an influence as to how much you paid attention, because we didn't pay that much attention to the civil rights issue because it seemed to be more of a Southern issue
yes.
than a Northern issue, at least from, unless you lived in a major city where,
I was in Steeltown, USA. There were just lots of blacks.
Yeah.
Lots of Mexicans, lots of Puerto Ricans. We called ourselves the melting pot because there were people from every nation in the world there.
see, we never had to deal with that until we moved to Texas. In fact, of all of the education that we probably gave our 2 girls, Melissa, Jackie, wasn't there in classroom. It was being infiltrated into this culture. That probably gave them a better education than the homogenized world that we were living in.
Georgetown is more homogenized than place where I grew up. And there's a few blacks here, but there's the Mexican descent because it's so close.
Sure.
But this is still pretty homogenized. If you take the Hispanics and the whites, that's probably 90% of the population here. It's pretty homogenized.
Sure. Well, I mean, even where we lived, I mean, the Mexican issue wasn't even, yeah, we were seeing things about the civil rights of the blacks or whatever, but had no concept of an issue with.
But it was an issue in Texas,
Oh, yeah,
particularly
particularly in East Texas.
well, east and also like San Antonio.
Huh?
I guarantee you, because if the blacks when they went to the movies,
Yeah.
they set up in the balcony.
There's
Now,
some
if
Texas-
you're a college guy
San Antonio.
and you believe that, you get in there and get in line with the blacks. So, you know, you could, kind of a protest against it.
Uh-huh.
But, but that's kind of the way it was. And really, San Antonio was very, to some degree anyway, at that time was pretty segregated too, pretty much.
Segregated.
But that's a different issue that with the blacks filtrated into that. And of course, I saw that from college. But whether you agree with that or not, or at that time, you know, that was another issue.
Yeah,
The issue is
I
if
grew
you
up-
think about it and combine it with your faith, that's really the kind of question. That's- And I would say, I did not. I mean, it certainly has us with other issues, but with that, I can't say that I never thought about that.
Society though, blacks typically weren't Catholic,
No,
and still typically are not Catholic.
more Baptist than anything.
More Baptist than anything. Very faith-filled, very Christian for the most part. Very almost exuberant
Mhm.
in celebrating their faith,
Yes.
but separate. And I think separate but equal.
that was the issue.
It was a new concept to think integrate.
Mhm.
Separate but equal was what was sought, I'd say, initially. And
Yes.
so we can have the Black Baptist Church and we can have the white Catholic Church,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
never the twain shall meet, except we can all clap our hands and say, you know, yay God.
They got.
But it was not together. During the 60s, when the civil rights issues were very big, and I'm in school in St. Paul, Minnesota, and there are all kinds of race riots going on, particularly in North Minneapolis, where my aunt lived. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? At home, growing up, had been one black family, and they weren't there that long, but there had been one black family. My mother was a journalist, and she was asked by Parade magazine to write a feature about the civil rights issues on the reservation in South Dakota, because we lived on a reservation. And
Because
the Indians were wearing red power while the blacks were wearing black power, badges. But they were wearing red power. And she interviewed some of the tribal leaders and some of the other members, and they wanted separate but equal. They did not want integration. The white man has taken enough of our culture. The white man has influenced our life enough. We don't want to be mixed in. We want separate but equal. Totally different than what was happening nationally
Mhm.
with blacks and whites.
Mhm.
Not exactly recognized
Mhm.
on the national
oh no.
stage, but the Native American to this day would like to be separate but equal, right? And Linda's nodding because you know that area too. And so I find that curious. Now, switch to 2026. I'm living in Texas. My daughter is married to a black man. They discuss segregation. He comes to church with her occasionally at St. Helens when they come up here. Otherwise, they're really not church going, because he was brought up Baptist, doesn't believe in infant baptism, and you know, a number of other issues. So it's like, you know, I'm kind of observing all of this, and they talk about discrimination, going back to, you know, some of the politics or the political situation that you talked about. And Christopher is convinced that he has been subject to more discrimination than Megan has. And Megan's my daughter. And Megan says, no, Chris, it's just, I'm in a different category. Well, yeah, but anybody can look at me and they just see that I'm black. And she says, anybody looks at me and they see I'm a woman.
Yeah.
And so she's
On
arguing
the
discrimination against women, and,
Yeah.
or she's a professional woman in a professional environment.
Mhm.
And she says, and look at your professional career, because they look at you and see that you're a black man, you have more opportunities. They look at me and see that I'm a white woman, and I have to prove that I deserve that opportunity.
That's true.
Now,
Wow.
what's good God-fearing Christian, not necessarily going to a particular denomination. But I find those conversations pertinent to what we're talking about, that there's politics involved, there's just life circumstances, and you've been illustrating a lot of them. Depending upon where in the country you've been at different times in your life, the demographics of where you're living have influenced who we are and the way we look at things. In my hometown on the reservation, there was the Indian Catholic Church and the white Catholic Church. We had one Indian family whose kids went to the Catholic school, but their mother was white. Their dad was Indian, and their mother was white, and she wanted them to go to the Catholic school. And they went to Catholic school, you know, all the way through 8th grade, which is when it ended. And then we all mixed together when we got to the public school. And I thought of them as being Indian. I didn't think of them as being biracial. They were Indian color. And everybody said, yeah, the Wilson family, yeah, that's the Indian family in school. Well, they weren't. Their mother was white. She had been a classmate of my dad's. They were friends, and you know, so what makes them Indian? So all of these demographic and social concerns, and the fact that there was a separate, and it was because the Indians wanted it that way. There was St. Catherine's, which was for the Indians, and there was St. Peter's, which was for the whites. Only now have they combined, because there's not enough priests to go around. And so now it's integrated because priests just can't get to all these different churches. So there's one, it happens to be St. Peter's, what was the white church. And they can still hold ceremonies and stuff at the Indian church if they want to. My point being that politics, demographics, prejudices have influenced faith environments for years, like forever. So you got the Black Baptist Church, and hey, sometimes I'd like to be there with their singing and their enthusiasm and their praise of God. And then you come to the Catholic Church, and it's like we don't know how to sing. You know, and
I know.
One question I think we're trying to get at is that how and when did the intersection of your faith / morality intersect with your political observations and thoughts? And I would have to say that's more current for me than anything. I can't say back with the blacks or back I didn't live with the Indians or anything, or with the Hispanic religion. Those weren't that much an issue to me. It's only been, for me personally, it's only been since the issues of abortion and Biden rejecting his faith in my mind in that regard. I guess I'm be careful, Jim. And you know, with this whole thing with immigration and ISIS and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's front and center. You can't ignore that. At least I can't. I mean, that just smacks you right in the face like a bucket of cold water. But up until then, in my case, maybe I was too busy living my life, raising my children, having my career. It's only been, now that I'm tired, and now that it's so blatant out there in the last few years, it's bothered me. Like I remember Deacon Joel, he and I were having a conversation in church. This had to be at least 10 years or more, actually. And I was commenting to him that I objected to all this illegal immigration. He looked at me with a very sorrowful look. He obviously didn't agree with me. He had a totally feeling about that, but we didn't discuss it. I just dropped it. I wish I had asked him about his feelings about it. We talked all day. But that's when I started to realize that there's an intersection that I'm not paying attention to.
Well,
I think that issues for me have caused me to look at things from my faith. What do I really believe? What does the church really teach? What should I be doing personally about these issues? And that's again, I never made that association before. It's just the last 20 plus years that's hit me. My faith has a perspective on this, and on these issues that I never associated before. I never thought of them.
But okay, good. But now, did the issues also have an effect on your faith? I mean, so your faith affected your view, but what about going the other way?
Yes, it did. I would have to say, as I try to understand what the church is teaching, it makes more and more sense to me.
It's more what?
More and more sense to me. I understand it more, and it makes sense, and I cling to that. I cling to what it appears that the church is trying to tell us to do, help us to sort through these
Navigate the-
issues.
What do you think the church is telling us to do with regard to this immigration issue?
Well,
I'd
again,
like to-
prudential judgment we end up with is prudential judgment. There are several different ways we can address these issues. So there isn't a single answer.
You're
It's
right.
I mean, we talked about it last week, but on many of these issues that I have, when I hear people talk about the various sides, I go, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way.
Mhm.
I hadn't thought about it that way. And in the past, I didn't even bother looking. But especially from our church leaders, we get this issue, we get this point of view, we get that point of view. Okay, what are they really saying? And how do we reconcile that? What does that mean to me, and what do I do?
So going back to Katie's daughter and husband. So that's a microcosm of what we're talking about, and even what Linda's talking about. So part of the problem is he saw his world and how he understood discrimination, but he never thought about seeing her world and how she understands discrimination. They're both discriminated against. I mean, even right now, as Catholics, we're discriminated
Yeah.
against, but we're not the only religious group that's
Yeah.
being discriminated against. So part of the problem is sometimes we can't see beyond our own lens because we're so caught up in our own stuff that I can't even imagine. I mean, right now, every one of us sitting in here, you are white privileged.
Yes.
Well, I'm sitting here with Marge and we're having this conversation and I'm going, man, looking at I went back to my life growing up and I'm going, I may be white, but boy, I'm going to tell you, I was not privileged. I mean, we did not live a life of luxury. We did not live a life of, my dad was working and hustling and everything to just get enough money to keep doing whatever. And I'm going, I just don't get the privilege thing. I don't know.
But we are.
Well, I'm not, but see, that's all in perspective, right? Because when I sit here and I'm going, well, yeah, living in Bankston, Iowa, I didn't think I was white privileged, but that was a pretty good life compared to when we would go into the New York and see the ghettos and see the living conditions and the whatever. And I'm going, but my point is, going back, you get caught up in your own world. So the Democrats are so caught up in their stuff, they can't see what the Republicans, and the Republicans are so caught up in their stuff, they can't see what the Democrats, or we're all caught up in even the Reformation, the people who wanted to break away from whatever, they're all caught up here. And how we can't come back together again is because now it's all about our stuff, right? The lens doesn't let me want to go beyond that parameter, because if I do, then I have to accept that change is on the way, because you're going to see the world differently. You're going to start thinking about it differently. I mean, your whole life in terms of the whole black, white, or whatever issue changed. I mean, the moment your daughter came home with a black person, even if you want to consider yourself to be
Accepting and-
accepting and open-minded, your first reaction, if you could, if we could just have recorded that very first moment, it's kind of like, oh, you might have kept your mouth shut. You might have tried to be open. You might have tried to be,
Just an example of this, my older daughter, who's only 2 years older than Megan, was dating a black boy, man, they were young. And Steve and I had a conversation with her about maybe that's not the wisest choice. Right? Good kid. When Megan told us that she was dating Chris, it was like, okay,
at that point,
we had grown, we had changed.
we worked through it.
How we were looking at things. And Christopher was in many ways less desirable than Heather's boyfriend had been. I mean, more accomplished, more he was more professional, very, very bright, from a middle class to upper middle class family. Christopher came from poverty, had a hard time getting himself through school. Very different, very different. Came from a ghetto situation, very different. But we could accept him. Maybe part of it was that our daughter's maturity was different than the other daughter's maturity had been at the time. But I like what you're saying, Linda, your insight, that you spoke very well to what I'm thinking and where I am too. How much does my Catholic Christian faith get influenced by or impacted by my political views and vice versa, to Dick's point? I'd like to think that I vote as a good Catholic, but my social circumstances probably influence my vote just as much as my Catholicism. And I'm going to say social circumstances more than politics, because politics, social
When you say
influences more.
circumstances, what do you mean?
Well, that I'm a white widowed woman of pretty decent financial means going to the polls. I'm looking at what are going to be the influences on my taxes? What are going to be the influences on my right to vote? What are going to be, so I as a social being, that influences my vote as much as my Catholic Christian belief system influences my vote. And I mean, maybe not, but and they're mixed. I mean, one influences the other.
Well, in fact, I would be willing to bet that voting now, your faith probably influences your vote as much as the other things, more than it did even 5 years ago.
Yes, yes.
That you went to vote and your vote was more on the financial, economic, whatever.
Yeah.
That now you have to vote your conscience because.
But it's all that, it's not black and white, okay?
No.
Because
Well, and there's the other part of the conversation, right? So you can look at homosexuality and, I know when back in 1980s, when my brother came home and announced that he was leaving his wife and his children and he was going off with another guy because he found out he was gay, the impact that had on not only me, but on our family. But
the fact that he was gay or the fact that he was leaving his family?
well, so so now you bring up another valuable point, because when that happens, there is no separation. It's just a big glob of everything is put together. But in fact, those are two valid questions. I mean, his wife was devastated. I mean,
I'm more upset with that than the fact that he was gay.
well, yeah. So again, to your point, there's no clear boundary. There's so many layers to each and every issue, but I'm still in my faith but beyond my faith, I mean, just knowing God or whatever, whether I was Catholic or not Catholic, I still see everything that's wrong with the same-sex marriage or whatever, because I don't know how that works. But having conversations with my brother, I mean, one time just sitting down and having a conversation with him. And he just came right out and said, "You think I don't know this?" He said, "You think I don't know this?" So I'm not liked by my family. I'm not liked by my friends. I'm not liked by the world. I'm not liked by, said, "Do you think I want this? You think I don't know why this is going on or whatever is going on." I mean,
I,
and I don't know that I agree with all of, but I now back up and I'm going, yeah, it's easy for me to sit on this end and spout my whatever and say this. That actually was the moment. You've heard me say it before, that I'm glad that in the end it will be God who will judge me, because with God I stand a chance, right? That was the moment when I came up with that understanding, because even with my brother, praying for him and all of anybody who's struggling with, and I'm sitting there going, okay, God knows more about what's going on than I do. I cannot judge this, that, or whatever, but
yeah, there's enough of an issue in there in my mind, maybe think off the side a little bit. You don't know how you will react to that kind of situation, so it affects you personally.
oh,
You
absolutely,
don't know how you react to the fact that your daughter, or
absolutely.
your son would come home with a person of the opposite sex or the opposite faith or the opposite race. You don't know how you're gonna feel about that. So, and those of us, like I haven't had that experience. Although I see my own daughter, she didn't get attracted to a black man, but she never could see a color. I mean, she was a child. I mean, I didn't see color when I was little, but I saw color as I got older for a lot of reasons. She's never seen color, you know.
But it's kind,
She could just easily marry a black man as a white man. She's
so
never seen
it's
color.
kind of interesting. Bert, that lives next door to us, black man, whatever, from Mississippi. So, I mean, I realized that he's lived there, never had this conversation. So we're out in the yard together, and I just basically said, "Hey, if you got a few minutes," and I just said, we don't ever really talk about this, but I said, here we are, Round Rock, Texas, living on Indian Summer Pass. You're the only black person in this neighborhood. How do you feel about this? I mean, do you feel what? Strange? Do you feel, yeah, what is it that you feel? Well, quite frankly, I was surprised when he basically said, well, he never really thought about it, because he was one of the very first few people who moved into that neighborhood when it was just being built. So he felt that all the white people moved in on him instead of him moving in on the white people. But
Is he better than feeling prejudice? And that's really the question.
well, but I asked him, I said, okay, but so you grew up in Mississippi? Yes. And I said, so what was your experience? I mean, did you experience the civil rights things? Did you experience? And he was like, well, my dad was a doctor, medical doctor. He said, we lived in a pretty decent home. I mean, yeah, it was kind of but he said, we didn't live in poverty. We weren't really I was surprised that he didn't seem that he was that affected by the whole whatever.
Where you really get into this too, if you're in service,
Yes.
in military,
Yeah.
you have.
You better get over it in a hurry, right?
Now, you may or may not agree with some of these guys, and it's separated out too. I saw a lot of this in military.
Yeah.
The blacks tend to get over there and they needed a certain table or whatever. They could eat a living. But the point is, they get together and get to making Latin holler and stuff like that. Whites all get away from it.
And in Fort Ord, California, when there were a group of blacks in the military that got together, guess what was the first thing that came to the mind of the white soldier? I mean, in your same platoon, but they hung out together.
Yeah.
What organization was popular, hot, and pardon?
Yeah.
The Black Panthers, yes. I mean, it was, in fact, you know, when you would go out on different maneuvers or whatever, you had to stack arms and whatever. There was supposed to be some schmuck of a soldier that was supposed to be watching over him, but that schmuck of a soldier didn't have any weapon or anything. Well, when we came back from maneuvers, apparently somebody came in and stole all the M16A1 semi-automatic, automatic gas operated lightweight shoulder weapons, which is your M16 rifle. And they're gone. I mean, they're gone. And it was found out that apparently the Black Panthers came, stole the weapons because,
The Black Panthers in the units.
oh no, I doubt it. I mean, but we don't know that the message didn't get passed on that, well, here's what happens in maneuvers and blah, 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 and da, 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 da. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. You know, I mean, it's just all going on around you. But even as such, I never transferred that to my faith. I never transferred that to, do I see it through a faith? I remember asking my neighbor, and I said, you know, I don't think that I'm racial, but I probably am. I mean, you know, in some respects, I probably am, but even if it's unintentional, it may still be there. And I was surprised. He goes, well, we're all racial. He says, I have my biases, you know, but
I struggle with that same question, but this is the aside from the original conversation with your neighbor. We have a neighbor, and Maggie and I were going for a walk one day, and we started chatting with him. And you know, our neighbor I don't think he was even black, okay, as well, but we start chatting with him. Well dressed, well spoken, young man, you know. He was a good athlete kind of guy too. But anyhow, so we started chatting, and it turned out he was in the Army. He was very bitter. If you took
About his military experience?
he was bitter about in his life, and including the military, is that he didn't get the opportunities he would have if he had been white.
That's how he saw it.
and that's probably a valid point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't refute those kind of things. I was disappointed to hear it. I worked closely with some black people at my company in Massachusetts. In fact, they both had superior positions to me, right? In the company, well-spoken, intelligent, well-educated people, excellent engineers. But, so I don't know, I never had the conversation. I never had the courage to have the conversation. And both of these guys I'm talking about, were married to white women. Okay.
That's where the problem really starts, when they start intermarrying with the white and blacks and whites. Then you've got a problem in the family or whatever, religion, so forth.
I don't know what kind of a problem it caused them, but the one black man left his wife, who was black, nice lady. We socialized, and he married a white woman who I think had been his secretary or something like that. I was disappointed when I saw that, but you know, it's more like it because you either one. The fact that she was.
But going back to what he had said about the military, that's absolutely true, because I grew up in an all-white world. I didn't know a black at all. And then I joined the military and was stationed at Fort Polk, Louisiana. I mean, I had never been out of Massachusetts.
The swamp.
And then lived with a black girl. Okay, I lived in off base in the trailer with a black girl, and I'll never forget this guy from Connecticut. He said to me, and she was great. I mean, I just loved her. She was more a mother figure to me because she was older than me, and that's kind of probably what I needed. I was just very young, and he said to me, "Why do you live with her?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "Why do you live with a black girl?" And I said, because she's my friend. And I just could, but that whole experience opened up my world so that I now look at things differently. I think if I had stayed in my little circle, like, my sister is still in that, and she's in her little circle. It never really opened up. And I think that's what, and I'm grateful for that experience, that I was able to open up new ideas in my head.
I mean, so just to keep this all kind of together, I mean, going back spiritually or faithfully, I mean, we have to remember that in relationship to even the Jews, this is the issue between the Hebrew Jew and the Samaritan. Samaritans were Jews, but they were mixed, right? Religion. They were whatever. So, I mean, discrimination has always been. I mean, if you were an Assyrian, you didn't like, if you were an Egyptian, you didn't like the Jews. Yeah, I mean, and vice versa. I mean, it's just a tolerance. But I think our world is so, back then, those kind of behaviors, I think, happened more readily because we were not so global, we were not so international. I mean, even when you migrated from whatever country you migrated from, Ireland, Scotland, Germany, France, you formed your neighborhood and you built your walls in a sense. But today, because we are so global, so international, so broad spectrum, but everything up until recently, and I think Katie and I were going back to the original article that Mary Ann sent out from Father Schmitz, his little homily about indifference. Yeah, and I think, just talking to Katie,
Or do we take action? That was kind of.
is that how? Yeah, and I think the gist of the article is, do we function faithfully or any other way with indifference, or how do we, or to your point, how do we as Catholic Christians engage in a particular situation? And that's a difficult question to answer. I don't think there is a right or wrong answer because, again, it's a multi-layered issue because you can take, and I was just thinking about it in my younger days, in my present day. In my younger day, abortion or in vitro fertilization, I mean, I know they were going on probably, well, they were for sure, but for us, if a young lady unmarried got pregnant or whatever, somehow she was sent off somewhere. The family would send them off till the baby was born, and then the baby would be given away and here's where we hear all the horror stories about what happens to children who were sent to orphanages or wherever they went to, which is another whole moral issue in and of itself. But if you had your child come home and saying she's pregnant and going to get an abortion. I mean, do you ever, who watched Dirty Dancing?
Yeah.
You remember
Oh, yeah.
when she came to dad on the golf course when he was putting to ask for the money. And of course he thought it was the guy she was dating, but it turns out, but that whole issue, right? Well, so now the argument to justify legalizing abortion was, well, let's get it out from the butchers in the back alley and at least let's put it out with a professional medical person. Well, that made sense, right? I mean, I don't care across the board what your faith was. Somehow that just made sense. Why would we let back alley butchers who are profiting off of it, let's at least give them proper medical Well, not knowing that that was in and of itself going to create, but if you're the parent,
Mhm.
if you're the parent of the daughter that comes home and says
Right.
she's going to get the, how would you, even as a Catholic, how would you have felt? If you're the parent of a married son or daughter who comes home and says, well, we struggle to have children, we're going to do in vitro fertilization. As a parent, if you came home and, well, even like my dad, my brother came home and declared that he was gay. I mean, the devastation. How would the reaction, how would you deal with each of those things? I mean, so in your faith, you're sitting here going, boy, that's just not right. I mean, yet, what do you do? So the child is born by in vitro fertilization. The daughter has the abortion. I know that you don't throw the child away. I know you don't throw your child away. I know you don't,
Or your brother.
or your brother or anything. You embrace them. I mean, ultimately, my family all embraced my brother. I mean, it took a while. But I mean, just to think about, I mean, it's easy for us to sit and look at a situation and then condemn that situation if I've not had to deal with it. But now that I have to deal with it personally, how does that affect my faith? So, and that was a question with my brother. Did it water my faith down that I became more liberal, to be more accepting of the whole? Well, there was a smidgen of a time where I would say probably yes, because I was feeling my brother's pain. But I had to get past that to say, well, he may be having pain, but that doesn't justify the end result, right?
Yeah.
It's tough to do with in vitro fertilization though.
All of them,
Yeah,
yes.
any of those things, once they happen, you can be accepting of the people involved without necessarily approving of. So our faith is our foundation for how we live our lives, I'd like to believe.
Mhm.
It should be.
And it should be.
Mhm.
And as Linda said, at least what I was hearing, that foundation gets an extra coat of concrete or gets some chipping away as time goes on,
Mhm.
as the experiences of life shape us. And it's good to go back with an examination of conscience to look at that foundation and see if it's strong, if there are cracks, and if there are cracks, how do we remedy that?
Mhm.
And so, I don't know, some of you maybe missed the introduction today, but Mary Ann had sent me the sermon
Mhm.
on Hallow, which spoke about, am I going to say it right? I care, but do I act with what I care about? Do I take action? Is that, yeah. So we care about things, but we
Yeah.
take action about those things.
Mhm.
And who do we look to
Mhm.
guide us in our actions? Well, first and foremost, we're looking at the church, but who is the church? And what is the church saying? And who within the church
Saying it.
Is saying-
is saying it, and who is influencing what we believe our church is saying? And when we all have non-Catholic friends who think they know what the Catholic Church is saying,
Mhm.
maybe they're right. Maybe that is that's what they're hearing,
Mhm.
but that's not what I'm hearing. So there's all these elements, I guess is what I'm trying to get to. So the influence of the social situation on our faith and vice versa, two-way street, going back and forth, back and forth. We're called upon, I believe, you know, what is an examination of conscience? I struggle with that. You know, so I form my conscience. But what's influenced my formation of conscience? All the things that we've been talking about this morning, our experiences, the people we know, the situations they're in, the characteristics of those people, all influences our development of conscience and our understanding of our faith. I'm here because I want to understand what God is asking. I want to understand who I'm supposed to be, how I'm supposed to live, what I'm supposed to believe that is pleasing to God.
Mhm.
And I submit that I think that's why most of us are here.
But I think that the whole thing boils down to the individual, what you're gonna do about it.
Yeah,
It's how you feel and it's how you act accordingly. But that comes from you. I mean, you have to make those decisions
Except you have
yourself.
to be a little bit careful of that, Don. I agree that I think it starts with the community, it goes down to the individual, but then from the individual, it has to go back to the community, because one problem in our world today is that it goes to the individual, stays to the individual, because the only thing that matters is the individual.
If
I
you
don't-
believe them, if you believe what.
Well, I think even in the sense that the world today is trying to tell everyone that it's only what
Yeah.
matters to you that's important,
Yeah.
regardless of who you are. So even though I'm sitting with you in the room, and even though I'm concerned about you, ultimately it's only about me and how it affects me. Well, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because then the faith becomes that, the politics becomes that, the validity becomes that, everything becomes that, regardless of how you all might be in agreement on a particular point, but because it's the individual, my world is right, yours are wrong.
But we
But you-
don't do enough honest
But
discussion.
you're in the world, but you're not of the world.
Yes.
yes.
See, that's the thing.
So.
And that's scripture too.
Yes, but my point is, yes, the individual has to form their conscience. But you can't stay in that individual state, because part of your conscience is formed by the ecclesia, right? So back in Matthew 16, upon this rock I build and he doesn't say a building or whatever. The word that's used is ecclesia in Greek, right? Well, that doesn't mean church as we understand it today. It means the community. I'm building the community, because what Christ understood is that individually we will screw up. We will mess it up. Which is part of the Protestant Reformation problem, is taking each person as their own individual. I mean, the advantage of the magisterium or the church, which Christ, I think, understood, is that, yes, we each as individuals have to form our consciences, but that's done in the broad spectrum of the body of Christ, of the community. I can't make those decisions apart from all of you.
But in the context of what you're saying, that's the problem with our political environment right now, is that individuals, in this case, it's individual parties, political parties, they don't talk, they don't compromise, they don't hash things out. They get so stuck in their, and I'm guilty too, okay? We get so stuck in our own belief system, valid or not, that this is what's right, okay? And you don't, I mean, we read about it in high school, in civics, and talking about how wonderful it is with our political system compromises. Well, we don't see a lot of compromises in our political reality.
Well, so again, going back to earlier with Katie, so Lenin, Marxism, socialism, this is their understanding, is they want to remove you from the community. They want you, because they can manipulate you individually.
Yes.
And we can control the narrative. It's harder to control the narrative of an entire, which which Hitler found out when with the whole issue with the Jews. I mean, whatever, but they were still a people. They're always a people, no matter how, going all the way back from antiquity, all the way back to Moses, Abraham, David. I mean, they were a people. Whatever you could do to them, you could not separate them as a people, and that's their strength, right? That's their strength in the world today. But to create the chaos, it's to put you into your own world, into your own mind. Well, now I can control that. I can manipulate that. It's harder to manipulate the broader spectrum of the community.
But somewhat of with when you're you were talking about community, and I think too that we are formed a lot, and maybe not as much today, but I think still a lot formed by our community, because that night on the bus in Los Angeles, what I took away from there is be scared to death of Black people, because they all were. You know, in there. And even going back to Iowa, when we would sometimes take shopping trips to go to Chicago, you feared that you didn't ever want to take a wrong turn and end up in the Black neighborhood. Because if it did, the car was probably going to be stolen from you or the tires taken off of it, and you may not come out alive. So you feared almost for your life of some of those things. So regardless of what your faith might have told one about being accepting of everyone, the community has created within individuals. And I think you see the same thing going on in Minneapolis. There's a community and a group of people who get together and insert this kind of chaos on some of this. And there's a lot of people who want to be part of that. And then there's a large group of people that are scared of that in there. And then they take what they saw and somewhat are a little bit hate-filled or whatever because of what they've seen going on. They take a decision one way or the other from what they see and what they want to believe, and then they go on with that belief then and spread that all over.
My take is very different on the Minneapolis thing. I see people who felt injustice was being done in the way ICE was conducting itself. And they sought to hold peaceful protests, and that sense of community in peaceful protest resulted in Washington looking again and saying, wait a minute, maybe the way we were acting was not appropriate. Let's send Homan in there and let's pull out the leaders and let's cool the temperature of what's going on. And we're not saying we're not going to stop, that we're going to stop ICE. We're not. We're not saying we're stopping immigration control. We're not. But let's examine how it's being done. So I maintain that the protesters got a hearing, got heard, and that Washington, which initially was saying this was a justified killing of Teddy, said, well, wait a minute. He was holding a phone. He wasn't holding a gun. We need to look at this. And when police are involved in a shooting, they're immediately put on administrative leave, whether it's your local cop or a federal cop. Why were these guys not put on? Okay, so yes, you're right about that. We're going to put them on administrative. So I think things are happening, particularly because of people acting as a community. And yes, there were troublemakers in that community. And yes, there were people with ill will and ill intent within that community. But I think the people that were out there hanging or carrying their signs and protesting the conduct of ICE, fortunately, have had a hearing, been heard, that there are changes coming in the way immigration is.
So you can tell from watching it on TV what the conduct of ICE was. And most of the pictures I've seen is that ICE is being attacked. Okay, so it's.
Well, see, we're watching different media then.
That's probably. I've seen. My perception of that, I want to jump to the topic, is that it had the local political beings, Fry and Walsh, whatever their names, had they chosen to cooperate with that process, then none of this would have happened. Instead, they, in my mind, are totally guilty of incinerating this. They lit a match and they kept pouring gasoline on it. So.
So,
I love you.
So, okay. all right,
I
discussion,
agree with you.
but the discussion for our purposes is very good. And the reason it's very good is because just in this conversation with Marge and Katie and Jim, all of it is valid.
Yes.
And then that's the part that we need to understand.
Yes.
Every one of you spoke validly. I mean, every part that Marge said, that Katie said, that you said, are all part and parcel to the total story.
But what's healthy is to have this discussion and be able to continue to be able to have it without, I mean, I had one friend that's a total liberal guy.
Mhm.
We can have these conversations all the time, but we can agree and disagree and just find common ground.
Well, I mean, even to your statement, this is what I see on the TV. Well, okay, yeah. So then I have to go back and say, well, maybe I need to look at other views as well. I mean, are there other, because Katie's seeing other screens and so both screens are valid.
That's true.
Whatever they happen to be, so in the Catholic Church, there's this question, justified war, right? Is there such a thing as a justified war? Well, yes, but it was pointed out to us, like with Vietnam, a war can start out justified and become unjust, or a war can start out unjust and become justified. But the problem is we sometimes don't see when the change happens, or we don't quite see how it embraces because we're too myopic in our views of what it is. It's the whole idea that I can't see the whole issue because I lived in white, supposedly privileged Dubuque, Iowa, that's 98% Catholic. I mean, moving to Texas, when we moved there in 91, we literally still thought we would see the bramble bushes flowing across the,
Little trails.
So my curiosity, Marianne, is you watched this video at the end. What was your take of what Father Mike Schmitz was actually trying to say, and what conclusion did you draw from?
I think when he started out talking about the fact that you could be indifferent, you have a situation happening and you want to do something about it, but what can you do? You're hopeless, helpless, whatever. But you can also, and a lot of people do that, particularly on social media, they get on there and they rant and rave about everything that's going on and make it worse.
Yes.
And there's nothing that they're going to do about it. Just like this, talking about the riots. I lived through the 67 riot in Detroit. I lived through the 68 riot in Washington, D.C. You had people who were protesting, yes, but they had a reason why they're protesting. A lot of what we see over the past several years is there are people that are instigating the protests or feeding the fires, and so they're doing something about it, but it's not the right thing they're doing. But essentially, sometimes in my mind, I think, I want to do something about this, but what can I do? Just one person, And so I just thought he had such an excellent homily. I don't know when it was from, but it was in yesterday's Hollow. And I just, after listening to the video from last week, I thought, oh my goodness, it just seems like it fits in with that, because everybody had excellent points and it was so good to hear both sides, and it was, or all sides, I should say, and it was civilized, and nobody got upset about anything. But that doesn't happen. And like you're saying in Congress, it doesn't happen. There isn't a compromise. There isn't two sides being heard. It's just one side.
Yeah, because I think here, I'm hoping the conversation stayed on the level of how does it fit in the broader spectrum of who we are as faith people and whatever, versus I need to be right in order to get my agenda across. And that becomes a political, but that politics pulls on the purse strings, I guess, of our faith, because am I too conservative? Am I too over the top? I mean, am I this? Am I that? Should I be more whatever it happens to be? So Father Mike Schmidt's other homily that kind of influenced part of my blog was, he didn't use the word indifference. There it was, are we interruptible? Is my life interruptible? In other words, I'm caught up in my own thing that when this situation is put in front of me, can I put my life on hold? Can I interrupt myself to deal with this? Okay, you're going to the grocery store in a hurry. You got to get your groceries. You got to get home because you have to make the dinner. And as you're walking out to the car with your groceries, somebody drops their bag of groceries. Well, am I interruptible? Can I get out of my head long enough in that moment to say, okay, even though I'm in a hurry, this person needs this help or that help or whatever, am I interruptible in whatever that happens to be? Which kind of struck me, because I find, and to his point, I mean, we're so busy. Can I interrupt my life to give God enough attention?
God, no, what?
Can I interrupt my life enough to give God attention? And so, I mean, he says, and a lot of things we're doing are valid things. He said, now there's a lot of things that are a waste of time, like TV, right? Our phones can be a waste of time. But with him, he says his schedule, I mean, all the sermons, all the videos, all the things he has to go speak at and whatever, conferences, all of it's valid. It's all for God. But as he says, when I have to stop and think about scheduling time in my day to give God some moments, he said, that's a problem.
Yeah.
That if I don't put God in my calendar, are we interruptible? Can we stop our life? And that's what I was thinking, even with the ice storm. I mean, we hated the ice storm. Well, we did. I don't know if I hated it. I sat out there and I'm looking at it and I'm going, boy, that lawn is going to love all that moisture when it's done. I mean, I tried to look at what all the positives, but the other part of it was, yeah, we couldn't go anywhere. Yeah, you have to sit here. Yeah, you can slow down. Yes, come to the quiet. But we don't deal with the quiet very well. We want it, but we don't deal with it well. So your question, and I know we're kind of running out of time, but the question, so what does God want us to do? Well, can we learn something? Can we answer that question in a bit from the Church of Laodicea in the book of Revelation? Pardon? Yes. I think the one thing that God is asking of us, don't be lukewarm. I would rather you be on this side of the issue or that side of the issue, but what I want you doing is talking about the issue. I want you involved in it. I want you to be interrupted. I want you to be interfered with. I want you to be, but the worst thing that can happen is we're just like, don't care. Not my problem. Out of sight, out of mind.
Talking about it is useful. You also have to be listening to.
Yes. Yes.
Well, yeah, and I think,
Yes.
Going back to like community, bringing it even further down, just within family. I do not talk to my sister about anything political, because if I do, she just starts screaming. And I'm like, that's my only sibling. And my husband's like, why don't you just not talk to her? I'm like, that's my only sibling left. I'm not going to stop talking to her because I want find out, the Riley family, how they're doing and so forth, but I will not talk politics with her.
Yeah, well, talk
I just-
politics with her, but let her talk. And then when she's done, you can say, well, you make a valid point. So what brought you to that point? How did you come to that reasoning?
Yeah,
How did you come to that understanding? Well, I mean, it's just like here, we learn. I learn from hearing the other, when we always talk, I'm not sure immediately that I'm buying into the message, but then when we're done having the conversation and I've had this chance, because I understand how my brain works. And for me, things have to be organized and logical, and they have to make sense, and they have to do, so when I'm hearing something from a different person that doesn't say it in the way my brain hears it, well, my first reaction is always to react against it. But then when I can sit there and process it, and then because the thing that I learned from the psychiatrist is that the first question you always have to ask yourself is, what was the validity of what it was that you heard? And that's what you have to work through. I have to get rid of my junk to listen to what was valid.
Yeah.
Because I do have my point, just like when I said to my neighbor, well, I could be racist. And he goes,